okay, just relax. Just keep it relaxed. Just keep it relaxed.
Where? Well, I don't know. Okay, children, sit on my lap. Come over here, I'll tell you a story. Okay, sure, I'll go there. Go for it. Excellent. She's not here. She's not here today. Hello. How are you? I'm John. What's your name?
You've got a card.
Hello. So what are we doing here, dudes? Dudettes? People?
You're having a good time.
This is a very relaxed way to say the community.
From your armchair.
What was that? You want me to tell you about the Kimberley? How many people have been to the Kimberley?
Oh, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, cool. Well, wow, I feel like a grandpa. Like I need a kid on my lap or something. Back in the day when many of you were very young. God, I don't know. Shit, where do I start? Okay, well, about 12 years ago, I went up to the Kimberley for the first time. I actually circumnavigated the country. I went the long way to Broome. I drove across the Nullarbor Plain and supported the waves at the coast. Played a really strange gig in. Cut across Mount Isa, went up to Kakadu, and then I went across the Kimberley and into Broome for the first time and played. And actually, that was my second time. Second time I met my wife up there, and the third time I went up there, I met a guy named Joseph Rowe. And Joseph Rowe is the senior lawman and custodian for a place called James Price's Point. That's the white man name for it. And but his mob called Walmadan, and he was given that responsibility to look after the song lines by his grandfather Paddy Rowe. And it's a stretch of coast that has over like 60 to 70 cultural significant sites. It has dinosaur tracks, as many as you know. I know many of you know this, but you fucking put me in this situation, so now I'm talking. So, and so I got to know Joe because my wife used to live on his land for a couple years, and got to be part of that struggle to save that part of the song line. And where that song line is at James Price Point, where it intersects and goes through, is right where an old man is buried, and a lot of and a few other very old people are buried. So for Joe, my good friend Joe and his family, so Joe was given that responsibility by Paddy, and Joe's sole responsibility is to protect culture, spread culture, and make sure that his young people can go through law. And the only way they can go through law is to make sure that that song line is protected. And so Joe's been offered millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to give up his song line and to give up that bit of land where that old man is buried. But for him, and for many of you I'm sure as well, to have a bunch of money in the bank but no soul and no country, and worth it. Exactly. So yeah, every time I guess I go places and sing songs, I'll tell part of that story, because that's what Joe asked me to do many years ago. He said, you're allowed to go and tell that story to many people as you like. And so that's why I'm kind of involved, I guess, in it, because it's a very close kind of a family thing for me. Also, the regions on the planet, although it has a lot of mining leases going through it at the moment. Whether it be off the coast, it's one of the largest humpback whale breeding, calving sites on the planet. Dinosaur tracks, 60 to 70 significant cultural sites, as I said before. The list goes on and on and on. The EPA that just approved it, which was a five-person EPA, 4 of them couldn't actually be part of the decision because they all had vested interests. So only one man made the decision to approve the site. But in the 1980s, in the 1990s, the EPA actually said you can't actually do anything there for cultural and environmental reasons. So the whole thing is kind of, I have like a few different levels of how I kind of approve things personally. And economic, cultural, socially, and political. And on each front, economically, it doesn't make any sense at all. I think the Citibank Investor Group just actually said that the actual proposal would make 4% more per annum on investment, if that makes sense, going down to Karratha, where there is already a gas refinery, than it would be if they built one there. So there's more money to be had using existing facilities in the Pilbara. Environmentally, as most of you know, it's a shit idea. Monsoon vine thickets and bilbies, untouched land. So we're like economically, environmentally, socially, it's shit. I mean, as far as Barnett and Woodside say, they say they care about the Aboriginal people, and that they want to give them housing and education and health that they deserve. And what we all say, and what Joe says is, why do I have to give up my land and my culture to get what all of you and I get for free? None of us have to hand over our land. None of us have to hand over our culture, our churches, our sacred sites to get basic human rights that we all deserve and that we all get. So that's a huge fundamental. So when anybody kind of even starts that process, just that alone for me kind of completely shits me off, and I end up going, look, if you really cared about Aboriginal people, you would have been there 20 years ago. It's funding health services and all these things. So to come in and go, we really care about your kids and we want your gas or we want your resources, it's just a bold-faced lie. And then so we got what we got. We had economics, we had environment, socially, and politically it's just like suicide, you know. 75% of Broome doesn't even want it. So as far as democracy is concerned, it's a completely undemocratic process. Apart from that, it was a 5-year negotiation process with the Indigenous people, which on many fronts was the most intensive that it's ever been with Indigenous people. But the problem is, at the very end of it, when the Indigenous groups, many of them divided by Woodside and Barnett, at the end of the day, when they couldn't reach an agreement, Barnett said, well, if you don't agree, we're going to compulsively acquire the land, which then that means is, if you don't agree, we're going to take that land by force. We'll take that land, we'll steal that land again. So taking our country back 200 plus years. So politically, it's illegal, you know, and it keeps on going on. So those are my 4 meters, you know, apart from morally and just like bullshit meter as far as smelling crap when I see it and smell it. But so that's kind of my story. That's how I see the events. It's going to be the world's largest gas refinery, one of the most untouched coasts on the planet. It's going to emit about as much CO2 as Hong Kong City, or Hong Kong, whatever the province. So it's a pretty bad thing, and the big thing about it all really is it's the thin end of the wedge. The minute they get that gas refinery in there and that port that they have to build, and they have to dredge 50, was it 50? I think there's like, they have to dredge for an industrial port for these big ships to come in. It'd be a 50 square kilometer marine dead zone. This is the place where the world's largest humpback breeding and calving grounds are. This is where Joe goes and fishes with his family. This is where Joe goes and takes his boys fishing. So once they do that, if they did build that, then it just completely allows a full-scale expansion of industrialization of the Kimberley, and that's the scary part. There are already mines in the Kimberley. I mean, there are all kinds of action already going on there. But the minute they put a port there, then it just means let's open it up like we did the Pilbara. And the Pilbara is a really sad situation because as much as they said they were going to help out the Indigenous people, after 20 years of mining, Indigenous people don't have any better access to employment, any better education rates, health rates, morbidity rates, death rates. They're all the same. So all the ideas that the resource industry are going to look after Indigenous people, factually shown through statistics, is a load of crap. They don't actually give a fuck about the Indigenous people. They want their crack. And crackheads will do and say anything to get their crack. That's just what crackheads do. You know? So in a way, it's up to us as individuals, like any caring family members who have a crackhead in the family, you kind of have to like have an intervention, you know, and not a bullshit intervention like they had in the Northern Territory, but a real one where we go, we the people of this country, whose country this is, who those people supposedly represent, we need to now intervene and take back our country. So I don't want to, I feel like I'm on a soapbox here. This is actually a really odd situation, but at the end of the day, that's what's in my head about the Kimberley, and that's what's in my heart. And so I know I have absolutely nothing more to say.
How do you feel about John, I've got a question too, mate.
Two questions.
How do you feel about the fact that these days it seems like lobbying, etc., doesn't seem to make a difference? You can get, I mean, if you just take the example of the Iraq War, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people marched in the streets all around the world, and yet didn't stop the war. So we've got tens of thousands of people marching in the streets about Kimberley, coal seam gas, all up and down the East Coast. It doesn't do anything anymore. The expression I use is that ship has sailed, that train has left the station. Back when days of like the Franklin Dam, etc., those sort of protests used to work. But now it just seems like they're just going to weather that storm and do it anyway, and make the money anyway. So I guess the point of my question is here, how do we, or more to the point, don't you think it's time we stop looking to governments and politicians to stop these mindless corporations from doing the work? And B, what's the next step? If we can't get the guys we elect to do the right thing by us, then what do we do?
Okay, massive question. That's all right. Let's start with the word lobbying, first of all. We don't lobby as people for the environment. Lobbying is when you heavily fund think tanks, then to go to Canberra to sit down and to manipulate the democratic process. So in the States and here, the resource companies heavily